40.4 40.4 40.4 40.4. Welcome to 40.4. It's an audio forward intermedia sonic summit hosted by B2 in the Atlas Institute at the University of Colorado at Boulder. Huge thanks to our sponsors at B2 and the Department of Critical Media Practices. Today, we're going to be hanging out with Tarik Barri and Mary Letera, checking out some audiovisual workflows. So we're in our second year of the festival. Just in case folks are a little confused, 40.4, why is it 40.4? Speakers everywhere. So if you look on the walls, there's little speakers. If you look up, there's little speakers. And then there's 4 subwoofers. So 40 speakers, 4 subwoofers, 40.4. Quick thank yous to Critical Media Practices and B2 for sponsoring these events. Special thanks to Undine Geary and Stephen Frost at B2, and also to Mark Gross at Atlas and Reese August at Critical Media Practices. So quick intro for Mary Letera. Mary is an intermedia artist, performer, and software developer who creates with light, sound, and dance. As a software developer currently working on the Videosync project with Tarik Barri and other developers in Europe, she enjoys seeing technology highlighted with the specific intention of encouraging deeper embodied experiences. Mary's practice incorporates movement and programming via motion capture technology to produce video, audiovisual, and mixed media performances, injecting the organic into the predictable and sometimes sterile world of coding. Thank you for being here, Mary. Mary's going to introduce Tarik, and we will get the session underway.
So I'm really excited and happy to be able to introduce Tarik to you. He's a Dutch audiovisual artist based in Berlin who's worked and performed with artists such as Tom York of Radiohead, Monolake, and Paul Jebanessim. And in addition to collaborating with other musicians, he composes his own audio and visuals live together in real time as part of the duo Zoe, along with Leia Fabricant. He's currently working on the software Videosync, a plugin for Ableton Live that allows users to compose visuals on the same timeline as their music. Tarik, thanks for joining us. I know it's a little bit late in Berlin.
Unmute. Hello. No, it's not that late. It's 9:05. That's very doable for me.
Good.
Mm-hmm.
So to begin with, I was hoping you could just share about your background in music and visual arts, how you came to combine them, and you could maybe share some examples of your work with us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's an incredibly long version of the story, and there's several shorter versions. It's always a question which one I'm going to go for. Yeah. Let's go for maybe a super short one, and then you can ask questions if you want to have longer detours. What brought me to combine both is basically I grew up with MTV. Yeah, born in 1979. I knew MTV from when it was a channel that was introducing video clips and the likes to the world. Actually, there no reality TV and anything. It was very much about video clips. I would together with my brother, but I think I was a little bit more enthusiastic. I would have my VHS recorder ready to stick into the thing. Well, no, it was already stuck in the player and the recorder, so that it would record whenever some cool Tears for Fears or Aha video clip would come on that I would really enjoy. That was something that I was very much into. From childhood until let's say 15 or 16 years old. And on a parallel trajectory, a little earlier in life, so that's not parallel, that's before. When I was 5 years old with my family, we moved to Saudi Arabia. And there I basically was more or less disconnected from my peers. We lived there. It was hot. We lived in a compound with not many children my age. Those who were my age were not interested in friendships. Mostly, unfortunately, that was too bad. They were more interested in fighting, actually, for whatever reasons. And so I was more or less stuck at home most of the time in the heat, and we had a computer at home as well. So that's where I learned to do a little bit of computer programming. It never took on any okay, of course, I was also a kid. So I was going to say it never took on any serious forms. How serious can it be? But what I wanted to say is basically that it was just like play for me. It was just a way of I liked Legos, I liked drawing, and I liked programming, and of course. At the time, I guess part of the reason why I liked it was also because I was not aware that this was. That this could be considered hard or intimidating or anything and it isn't. Depending on where you set your goals, it's definitely not intimidating. I could just type in 3 words and then a little melody would play. That's really easy. And so all you need to do is not be scared and just continue tinkering. And at some point, you'll get somewhere. And that's basically what happened with me. I was too young and naive to understand that I could or should be scared, and that was a blessing. Because maybe if I would have tried to get into it at a later age, I would have thought, oh no, that's not me. I'm way too chaotic because I am chaotic, and I'm way too, I don't know what's. So yeah, that is, I guess, in a way, a luck, even though it also made it hard for me to communicate with other kids my age when I came back from Saudi Arabia when I was 10 years of age. So programming, 5 to 10 years old. Then I got back to the Netherlands, tried to make friends. Sometimes that kind of worked. Was super interested in video clips on MTV. Later on, after high school, I needed to do something, and I was quite convinced that I could not be an artist. Even though I secretly kind of wanted it to be an artist, but also it seemed to me like that required a type of very dedicated personality who constantly was having these super interesting concepts in their mind, and I just thought I wasn't one of those people. So I still wanted to make pretty things and earn money, so I did architecture for a year. Only for a year, because I really wasn't interested enough, and I found it all way too hard. And I think that the reason that I found it too hard was because I wasn't interested enough. I think that was the main thing. And then I did psychology for a couple of years. That was much closer to what I wanted. I could have continued doing that, but I also, in the meantime, was making some music sometimes. And at some point, through some weird coincidences and connections, a track of mine got played by this DJ called John Peel on the BBC radio in England. And that was apparently a big deal. And I took it as a big sign as well. So I then quit my study in psychology. Well, initially I kind of half-assed quit. I quit for a year, thought I just need to make some more music, but then I need to get back because I need to be a responsible adult. But after a year of not doing psychology and making music and then coming back to psychology, it took me around 1 or 2 weeks' time to realize that I was totally betraying myself and that I felt like a terrible person. I was being an asshole to myself. That didn't feel good. So I had to stop again. And this time I applied for the study of audio design in Hilversum in the Netherlands. And there I got to learn about, I got admitted, thank God. Also, I just got admitted, I wasn't like a convincingly great potential student. I just wasn't bad enough for them to want to reject me outright. And I had already made clear to them, if you're going to reject me on this first go, I'm not going to try a second time, because basically I'd already spent so many years studying that if I would extend that amount of years further, I would have to pay everything back, because I'm privileged and lucky to have lived in the Netherlands, and there we deal with a completely different type of study funding and everything than you guys do. So yeah, for me, basically I was running up until a deadline. I knew if I wasn't going to be admitted that year, then I wasn't going to do it at all. So they basically said, well, we didn't think you were that great, but we didn't think you were terrible either, so I guess you can give it a go. And so thank the Lord that happened. I then learned to combine programming from way back in the days when I was a kid, all of a sudden that came back into me again, and the music making and the fascination with video clips. All of that sort of like combined at some point during the studies, especially when I realized that I could use the programming techniques that I was using for making visuals, for making sounds, because in the study I learned about Max MSP and little bit of C++ programming, and basically I could really easily, through the same methods, make visuals. So with my general interests, also this sort of like dormant semi-desire to do something artistic as well in a visual sense, yeah, that just combined, and all of a sudden I could do everything that I always wanted, and all of a sudden it wasn't a fragmented collection of things that I was interested in. All of a sudden, a lot of things came together into this one thing that I could do. So that was the very first moment that I actually became truly a good student, and because finally I was truly interested in, and I didn't feel any part of myself was being excluded anymore.
Awesome. So I'd love for everybody to see a little bit of your work. So if you could play a couple clips and maybe just give a little introduction about them and the context of everything, that would be great.
Cool. Then I guess that I need to share my screen. Yes, cool. Yeah, cool. So this is basically my very first audiovisual thing that I ever made. This was when I just discovered that I could work, that I could use my program for both visuals and music. So I used Ableton Live, the music sequencer, to create some music. All of the tracks of audio I routed through this protocol called Rewire. I routed all those tracks into Max MSP. And in Max MSP, I wanted to have some kind of visual response to what I was making in the music. I did not know much about making visuals. Of course, I just got started, and I'd also never done doing digital visuals in any other kind of a way. But I did have my laptop. I had a webcam, so I decided to just use that, my head in front of the webcam, and record it. And I'm just going to just show this and then tell you how I did it. By the way, if I do this at full screen, do you see this on full screen as well?
Yes.
Awesome. So this was, I'm actually kind of still proud of that simple idea. This was me just recording, and I'm going to stop screen sharing because you need to see my real face right now. This was me just looking at the webcam as I'm doing right now and doing this. And that was it. Then I chopped that video up into these bits, basically the lower side of my face, this quadrant and this quadrant. And I played, basically I took them as three separate pieces of video that I could play back. And those pieces of video were just right next to each other. I don't think I'm explaining myself that well, but basically I just made that I could play back the different parts of the video and make them go to different frames. I did a little bit of crossfading between the lower half of my face and the top half of my face, so you don't get super obvious like lines of where it's cut. And yeah, that was it. And then I made myself a little bit greener because I liked the work of Chris Cunningham, this visual artist who did a lot of stuff together with Aphex Twin, who I also was a big fan of at the time. I still think is brilliant. So yeah, that was a little bit of my inspiration, and I made this thing, and it was super inspiring because also it made me made me create the different type of music, because my face, my virtual face, was responding to what I did in the music, and I then also changed what I did in the audio to make my face respond in different ways. So that was a really interesting thing. I then continued in the studies. At some point, got into making my own sequencer, which I'm also going to show just a tiny little bit of. The matrix sequencer. Yes. Am I sharing my screen? No. Yes. Okay, cool. So this is when I became more interested also in what does it mean that my eyes are telling my brain what to do with the sound. And which kind of ways can this whole feedback mechanism between eyes, ears, the ways of thinking that are introduced to you through visuals and whatnot, how can I play with that? How can I also play with basically my own brain? Because my own brain doesn't just create, it also is very much part of this whole causal chain of I'm creating, I'm doing stuff. The things I'm doing are then being sent back into me again. What happens if I disrupt that flow or just make it go through other routes? What happens if I change the methods of composing and use that by having different types of visuals as well? Basically, what my basic question was what happens if I make music that doesn't just work as most does, as most of music works? Most music is represented from left to right. You got your notes in classical notation. You got your MIDI piano roll thingies in Ableton Live or in Cubase or whatnot. It goes from left to right. I was wondering what happens if you can play notes from left to right, but also perhaps from right to left or from up to down and whatnot. So I created the matrix sequencer during my studies, and that looks a little bit like this. There's some Dutch text there below. What you can see here, by the way, is there's these two balls that are moving through this grid simultaneously. The one is going slower and the other is going faster. So I also was just working with polyrhythmical stuff through this method, see what happens then. I also had the option of having the balls play the notes that they're hitting at different octaves, or maybe one quint lower than the other. So I was just going quite wild with what the possibilities are of this unique way of creating music. And I also made a mode where I could basically turn off the visual appearance of the grid below. And I could even get the virtual camera to follow the ball in 3D. So yeah, this last little bit of this all happening in 3D, that kind of inspired me to take that a little step further. I made a three-dimensional universe at some point where I could make all the sounds not be on a two-dimensional grid that I could then follow in 3D. I placed my notes inside three-dimensional space, and I could fly towards them, around them, etc. At some point, I developed that even further, where I could take live inputs. So right now, I'm going to show a little video of myself and Lea Fabricant over here, where she is recording herself, the image of herself being recorded through the webcam. She has a microphone, so sound and visuals are being recorded. And those sounds and visuals are being placed in a three-dimensional space that I'm then flying through with my little joystick that's literally called the Space Navigator. As I get closer to objects, basically as I get closer to instances of her singing, I will hear her closer. If she's to the right of the virtual camera, you'll hear her to the right. So basically, it's very much like you would be floating inside a three-dimensional sound universe. What would that sound then look like? Yeah, that's what I'm going to show you a little bit of here. And also what you're seeing right here in this image is you're seeing these images of her, and you're seeing us behind it. That's because we had a semi-transparent screen in between us and the audience, which was really cool. So they could see the product of our work in between us and themselves. And that kind of, yeah, was really cool. And I want to do that more often. Skip a little bit. Yeah. Just for records, this is a really shitty edit, so still under development. So that cuts off at weird points. My apologies for that. In this little bit of the video, you can see that the image of her is smearing, being smearing around the screen, which is an effect that we chose to use to coincide with reverb. So once you get more of an echoey, reverby audio results, you also get these smeary lines. She would have control over a whole bunch of the different parameters, where she could just basically amp up the reverb or make or apply all kinds of other effects. And all the effects that she would apply were both effects in audio and in visuals. So yeah, that is yeah, what I want to say here? Oh yes, that it is not so much that the visuals were caused by the audio or the audio was caused by the visuals. It is more both were happening in conjunction. in a similar way to when you would, now you're not seeing me speaking, but if you were to see me speaking right now, you would see me speaking and you would hear me speaking, but it's not as if your hearing of me changes anything about your seeing of me or the other way around. They are both just happening simultaneously. Same is true for this system. When Leia is applying effects and doing stuff, there's all these things happening that are happening in conjunction, but they are not necessarily influencing each other. They are both being influenced by our behavior, by our actions. And what we see here are lines that are created through the playing of a little keyboard that she also had. Whenever she would play notes, which would trigger a software synthesizer in Ableton, you would hear the sound through Ableton. You would see the visual through the software that I made. This was represented not as a webcam recording, but as a three-dimensional line that was making its path through three-dimensional space. Yes. Oh yeah, this I also want to show. We also had the option of creating envelopes that would basically they were like little gates, little volume. Okay, basically imagine you have a continuous sound. And just over a very short period of time, you ramp up the volume and then make it go to silent again. And then a little later, you ramp up the volume again and make it go to silent. So continuous sound becomes and if you make that period of time very, very short, it becomes like a tick. So here you see a little point where we had these continuous sounds of these lines, made them very, very short, that they became like little ticks. And we also had thought of different ways to create a visual counterpart to that. So what does a tick look like? So yeah, this was one solution that one could come up with. This is in any case the solution that we had at that point. Oh yeah, this is another point where we applied very fast envelopes on top of Leia. On top of that, so we decided this would basically be visually represented by her also visually being cut up. We also made her black and white in this image because ticks don't have a very clear tonal component. It's not like you can say, oh, that's a C-sharp tick, like a tick is just a tick. So we thought, okay, so we just remove the color out of the visual to sort of like symbolically catch that as well, that it feels like, that it might feel like it makes sense. So there's, of course, a lot of interpretation, a lot of different ways that you can, how do you call this, design this. But the goal is for us was, of course, to have in the end be that it feels like, oh, obviously, this is what that should look like. Also, obviously, that's not true at all. You can have many different ways of creating this stuff. But we hope to make it so convincing that at some point it would feel like, yeah, oh, this is clearly how it's done. But also, I find it important to verbally tell everybody, no, that's not clearly how it's done. There's so many different ways of doing that. And that's also kind of cool about it. Okay, sorry, my phone was going insane there for a second. But okay, so this is a project I'm very proud of. I'm going to quickly just continue because otherwise we're running out of time. So here is basically the very same system, but in this case, I turned off the sound, let some other people make the music, and I just basically collaborate with them. And of course, the visual side of it can in some sense be way more crazy and free because it doesn't need to tightly connect to any sound. It's more of a free interpretation that I will show right now. Yeah. Stop share. Cool. So yeah, I think that's like a quite wide overview of the stuff that I've been up to.
So I would love to segue into stuff you've done with spatial audio. I know that with Versum, you apply some of these techniques You've done an installation with Tom York, City Rats,
Mhm.
yes.
Mhm.
And that was sort of an immersive environment. And I would just love it if you could tell us a little bit about how you handled that, and in particular, how you treat the relationship between the audio and visuals in that sort of an immersive space.
Mhm. There's the system that I made with basically it was in the same way of creating audiovisual stuff as I showed just now with Lea Fabricant, with the transparent screen between us and the audience. So the general idea of how to relate space to visuals, that was not going to be conceptually much of a question, because it was very clear. I already had this three-dimensional environment. All the objects already had their precise. It was very clear from which direction it would come. Like if I had a system where I would normally work in stereo, and all of a sudden I had like 64 speakers, then this could raise enormous questions. So like, okay, so now what am I going to do with my whole stereo mix? Where does what go? In this case, it was clear. Things that are above me are going to be heard from above me. Things that are to the right, like it was all going to be basically the same, just with more speakers. And the general idea of how to spatialize, in this case of the installation with Tom York, it was I used some system. I forgot the name of it. It was made by the Earcom people who made Max MSP, who originally made Max MSP. Now it's made by another company. But the Earcom people, they had made some spatializer in Max. They did use Max, and I used that thing for this installation that also had a crazy amount of speakers. I don't know, 32 or something. A lot of that technology I didn't have to deal with. I didn't want to deal with. I would hate setting that kind of stuff up. I don't necessarily like setting up any more hardware than is absolutely necessary. That's why also I myself am often kind of happy with just a projector and a screen and two speakers. Often that I'm very, very much more focused on the content, even though obviously certain types of content can only be shown and be experienced with a minimum amount of hardware. So I'm not necessarily trying to make a dichotomy there, but in general, I often feel like I'm totally happy using relatively quote unquote conservative means, a laptop, a screen, two speakers, maybe a subwoofer. That could be nice. And that's often what I'm content with. But also, it's of course cool to have two more speakers, perhaps to the back, to have four speakers, and then either in stereo or in quadraphonics. My basic technique of approaching panning and spatialization is more or less the same inside this three-dimensional world. I've got my virtual camera, which is now just basically my face. Let's say my eyes are, or my center eye is the camera. My, how do you call it? The Buddhist Hindu eye. The third eye. The third eye. My third eye is the camera, and here is one microphone, and here's the other microphone, which is in fact also, of course, what your ears are: microphones, and the data of those of the sounds being projected onto my brain. So I got my two microphones, and I made that. I just made, how do you call that? I mimicked that inside the virtual world. So there's one microphone that's to the left of the virtual camera. There's one microphone that's to the right of the virtual camera. And if a microphone was closer to a sound source, it would hear it louder, and if it's further away, then it would hear it less loud. It was really like that simple. I also added some directionality so that if it were somewhere within this sort of like field of view, this field of here, in this field of here, then it would be louder than if it were outside of a certain range. So yeah, that's how I made it. How it defines the volumes. That's each of the two microphones will be picking up from the virtual objects inside the virtual space. On top of that, I also had a virtual sound speed, which actually was a really, really great idea for reasons I didn't even realize at the time that I made it. But if you have a virtual sound speed, well, let me first explain how I implemented that virtual sound speed. All I did was, so there's an object, it has a certain distance from your microphone, and that means a certain amount of delay. So all I did in the computer was I calculated the distance between this point and my virtual ear, and that times some certain number is the amount of milliseconds delay that you get. So now you get less milliseconds delay, now you get more. That's it. That's how you create speed of sound inside your virtual world. And that automatically means that when things would go whizzing by, you'd get Doppler effects, which is super cool to also just have this experience of space and movement and motion also in the audio. And even when it's happening very, very subtly, if there's just subtle movements, there's the very subtle, really not perceptible changes in delay make that very easily, that basically very, let's say, cheap or simple computer sounds that could otherwise be very annoying, they could really just burrow a hole into your brain and ear. When you add a little bit of fluctuating delay to it, they become so much more natural. All of a sudden, it becomes a real sound. I had not known that was going to be a consequence of rebuilding nature to some degree. But yeah, that's what happened. So that was like super cool. And apparently also, which I didn't know at that time, but it's also true, that if a sound hits your left ear ever so slightly before it hits your right ear, then that minor difference in delay is something that your brain subconsciously picks up on and realizes, oh, it's coming from there. So the difference in timing ever so slightly, it helps you also localize where a sound is. It's even the case that if the sound enters at the same volume in both ears, but it hits your left ear a little bit earlier, it sounds louder in your left ear because that's what your brain makes out of it. So yeah, I coincidentally stumbled upon several ways of spatializing simply by thinking what would happen in real life.
So I would like to segue into talking about Videosync, which we are working on together. And I guess tomorrow evening when we have our fixed media performance, you will have a piece being shown that you created with Videosync.
Yeah.
So yeah, tell us about that project.
Yeah. There was a Dutch guy who I didn't know who emailed me and asked if I wanted to maybe do a video. He wrote me at the right time because I was just working on some effects, some visual generators in the Videosync that I really wanted to try out. I was experimenting a lot with it, but also in order for me to really, really know intimately what it is that I'm making, I need to often use it to create something. Yeah, I need to not just experiment with it, not just see like, oh, it can do that, oh, that's cool, oh, it can do that, that's cool. I need to have a goal that is beyond just testing the device. I need it to do something. So I can bang my head, I can get frustrated with the thing, maybe during the process. So I can really understand which ways it needs to be developed further. This was actually a great opportunity to do that. And this guy, was an unknown relatively. He didn't have much money. I think he's also quite young. So that was great. I told him that, and I really liked his music. That's important as well. So I decided to not ask him for any money, just use this as a cool way to maybe make somebody happy, but also not be too bummed out if I failed miserably. Because that's sort of like freedom by not asking for any payment. That gave me the freedom to indeed also fail miserably without anybody being necessarily justifiably angry at me. Basically, it meant that I could use Videosync to just experiment and go wild, see what happens. And that's what I did. And that is also the piece that you'll be seeing tomorrow, seeing and hearing. And one question that came up during this process of then making that video was how do I get the movements inside the visuals? When you got some techno music or something that is more grid-based, that can be somewhat easier because you have a grid in Ableton. You can set the BPM to be nicely matching the music, and then you can put your MIDI notes exactly in the right spots, and things all synchronize in a nice way. Because often I do like some synchronization in the work that I do. In this case, it was all made by actual live living musicians without a click track, so the rhythm was more free and much more fluid. Also, I don't know why, but I didn't have much time. I don't know, was it maybe because I was postponing it to a deadline or something? In any case, at least in my experience, I didn't have much time, and I definitely wanted to get something done. So in order to get the fluctuating rhythm and the life of what I heard inside the system, I at some point decided to finally go for it and dance myself. So I used was this webcam. It might have been this webcam. No, it wasn't. It was an older webcam. Doesn't matter. I used a webcam and then played the music. Jumped in front of the camera for a bunch of times. Every time getting more and more enthusiastic, wearing different things, and at some points, yeah, I took one take that kind of worked for me, and started just experimenting with that, seeing what I could do in Videosync to make it go from just a silly guy jumping around in front of a webcam in his room to something that's, you know, somebody who doesn't know me intimately could also maybe appreciate or find, I don't know, inspiring or whatnot. So I think I'm going to share a little bit of this strange guy jumping around. Yes, so that you can also see, maybe start imagining what could possibly have been made out of this. So let's see. You can see this right now?
Yes. Yeah.
Awesome. Oh yeah, here's me wearing different outfits. There's me in full black. Here is me trying to wear a jacket. At some point, yeah, this is the one that became the final video. Yeah, I didn't even have a proper amount of distance between myself and the cam, so you could only see a part of me is. Okay, I'm going to show just the beginning of it. Etc.
And do you have a little clip? We don't want to watch the whole thing and spoil it, but do you have a little clip of the finished product that we can see how that
Yes,
Good
sure,
and
sure,
cut.
sure.
Yeah. And you used plugins that exist already in Ableton Live or in Videosync that people can drag and drop and use out the box, or did you use some custom shaders?
Well, I use stuff that is not out yet, but basically, yeah. Well, these are things that were under development, and some of them haven't been released yet in Videosync. But in the next version of Videosync is coming out in like 2 weeks. But the version after that is finally going to contain these things, which I've been waiting for a long time to finally be able to release. But yeah, it took a lot of fine tuning, and this video clip was a nice part of that. So I am now going to share once more. Yeah. Yeah, that is the preview.
Okay, so I think maybe now's a good time to ask for some audience questions, if that's okay, if you ready for that? Okay.
Hello. I'm wondering, in the video you played with the live instrumentalist, how you synced the visuals with the audio, if you use sensors for that, and how you deal with latency in those types of live performances.
Yeah. Well, it depends on the live performance. This is one case where I had where the timeline of the electronic part of the track was for, well, there was like 6 tracks that we played, 6 songs. 2 of them were more freeform, and there I just did not synchronize. I just purely improvised based on the plan, but I improvised to the music as it was taking place. And so there was no super tight synchronization in those 2 tracks. The other ones were had electronics go according to a very strict, always the same timeline. So there I just pre-made a whole bunch of trigger points that I knew exactly when they were going to be. I had also through Ethernet cable and open sound control protocol. There's basically just it's time. I made sure that the timing of my computer would know where his computer was, and so in that sense, I could basically what I'm trying to say. I had my automation on a timeline on my computer. I would completely match what was going on his computer in the audio side, and I would on my computer keep track of where his computer is, and I could myself decide how much of an offset, either to the front or to the back, because I just have my preset timeline. I can move it to the back or to the front, it doesn't matter. So what I would do before our gigs is we would play some of those tracks, and I would look at how much do I need to offset it to exactly have the visual hit at the exact same time as the audio. And that's the way I solved that. And by the way, this ability to fine tune is super, super important, because all these different places that you go to, sometimes your visual signal is going through three other machines that are splitting, merging, and whatnot, and another processor. And sometimes it just may take even like 1/10 or 2/10 of a second before your image appears on the screen, and it's nice to be able to compensate for that. And in this case, when the whole timeline is already clear in advance, you can do that. One other way of synchronizing a little bit more free-form thing could be, at least if you have a non-live, well, if you have a non-acoustic electronic musician, you could have that person improvise, make all kind of beats on the fly and whatnot. And if you would have your computer then analyze what's going on there in the sounds, then your computer would always be a little bit later, because visuals tend to lag behind them, the audio a little bit, because the audio comes first, then it goes through my computer, it does some analysis or whatever, or it tries to respond to the MIDI trigger that musician had already given me, but it will always be a little bit too late. And a little bit too late is very, very, very annoying. It's annoying. It's if it's close to good but not quite. It's this thing like, yeah, I want, when I see that happening that other people have, it's like there's a constant frustration if it's like almost right but not quite. It's like an itch. It's not a pain. It's not terrible, but it's just an itch. You can live with it, but also, I would rather not have it. So the way to solve that itch is, in this specific case, would be to have the musician send their MIDI triggers and whatnot, or audio, into your computer. Your computer needs some time to process, then sends its image out to the screen. And meanwhile, the musician also sends out their audio signal to the PA, to the speakers of the venue. But that musician adds a little bit of delay between themselves and the PA. So then they can fine-tune how much delay the sound needs for the visuals to be in time relative to that sound. I hope that makes sense. Basically, if you have the audio go to the visual computer immediately, but you wait a little bit before it hits the speakers, then visual and sound will hit the audience at the same time. Did that make sense?
Yeah, thank you. Just one quick clarification. With the instrumentalists, the one that was playing the faster beat, would that be generally like kind of to a metronome in rehearsal? You would set your controls to that and then be able to adjust like the velocity and start time?
Well, with that, actually, we had I'd almost implemented. Okay, so to be on tempo with what he's doing there, forget it. That's not going to happen. No matter of computer wizardry is going to make that work. So that was just already outside of my whole concept of possibilities. What I did think might be possible was to take a microphone recording of what he was doing, and just have a general sense of the volume and have something move visually very quickly at the tempo that feels about right, and that gets more and more hectic as the volume goes up and down. So not to try and be precise, but to still get the general feeling right based upon some kind of general volume analysis. So to basically accept the limitations of the system I'm using, and then of course also use those to improvise another solution to still get to a result that feels right. In the end, I didn't even use that. I thought it was more appropriate after a bunch of tries to just purely do this by ear and by eye. So I looked at him closely, saw what he was doing, and with the sliders, I would just a little bit adjust to what he was doing. And then maybe at some point, as I saw it slowing down, I would also turn down another tempo slider to slow stuff down. And just by knowing well enough how the musical piece works, it doesn't necessarily have to be completely synchronized. Like I said before, what's really annoying is when something is kind of almost precisely synchronized, but not quite, and then it starts getting that itch. If, however, there's clearly a more free interpretation going on, where still visuals are very aware of the audio, but it's not necessarily the same, that also completely works for me. So that's the approach I took there.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Question incoming.
Hey there, thanks a lot for the presentation today and sharing your work. It was great to see. I was very intrigued by when you were talking about the situation where you're sort of reproducing the Doppler effect by adding delays to sounds based on how far they were in this virtual world. Are you using like a game engine or Unity or something like this to do this sort of work, or where is that work actually happening? Where's the 3D world model?
Yeah, the work is happening in Max MSP, but also is happening inside Java in Max MSP. So in Max MSP, you've got all these little objects that you can connect together, and they you can basically make visuals and sound producing little machines inside Max MSP. And you can also create your own object within Max MSP that is written in Java code. So for all the complexities of storing a three-dimensional locations, having all these objects floating around inside a three-dimensional space and whatnot, I really wanted to have in a way, the precision and the ease, the ease of use of a written language. I won't go into that too much, but sometimes visual languages are visual-based programming are way easier. Sometimes written languages are way easier, depending on what you want to do with them. In this case, Java was great for me to keep track of where everything was. And then this Java object would spit out information so that the Max MSP, the visual engine, would know where to place all the objects inside the visual space. So yeah, the main brain was Java, and then Max was its arms and legs. Oh, and initially also Super Collider was, I also used Super Collider to then also produce the sounds. Later on, when computers became fast enough for me to not have to be super efficient anymore, I switched to using Ableton Live as my audio engine, just because Ableton Live has so many fancy bells and whistles and instruments and everything. And I didn't like working with too much code. If whenever possible, I like to leave just code the things that needs to be coded and leave the other stuff that maybe is perhaps done better by other people, leave that to what they made.
Great, Tarik. Thanks again for being here. Just one final question before we wrap it up. I'm wondering if you can shout out some other artists, whether they're, lesser known, well-known historical figures. You talked in your, maybe it was a conversation we had or in your bio about visual music a bit. And I was just wondering if you could give us a clue, some other projects that you're interested in that we could check out to kind of continue this exploration of audiovisual workflows. So just some other artists, projects, current, contemporary, historical, anything that comes to mind.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm always really terrible in this aspect. I know, of course, well, I know of some artists, but I don't know of nearly as much as I personally think that I should. I tend to generally take my inspiration. I mean, I liked video clips way back in the day. I still like, I still like the works of Arca and what's. Jesse Kanda, yes. There's this visual artist who works together with Arca, who I really like. I don't know what he's done lately, but he's made a bunch of really great videos. There is Chris Cunningham, who unfortunately, he had a brilliant period of time and then more or less disappeared off the map. Also, after making a video with for Madonna, I don't know if that just made him think, okay, fuck it, and I'm done with this job. I know what happened there, but yeah, he did some amazing work together with Aphex Twin and yeah, so in the end also with Madonna. And what else? There's one video clip of Ottaker called Guns Graf, and that's done by Alexander Rutherford. Also a guy who made basically just a few great works and then disappeared off the map. That does seem to be a theme. Yeah, there's also another guy, Rainer Kohlberger, who I know. He lives here in Berlin. He's done some really amazing stuff as well. but also from him, I haven't seen so much lately. There's a theme of people plopping up on the map and then disappearing off the map. I don't know what that is, why that is. I'm doing my best not to disappear myself. But yeah, other influences. I actually had some fun when Mary asked me the same thing some time ago, and I basically gave her a list of whoever came to mind. I think I'm just gonna ask you, Mary, in combination with me, to maybe expand that list a little bit more and just give as much as possible, also for myself to be reminded of who else is there in this field. There's of course Ryoji Ikeda, and there's Alvo Noto, there's Robert Henke. Well, yeah, but those are all on that list. And yeah, and I find that the list actually it's not just my own lack of knowledge, it's also in general, the list is relatively small, which I often find a shame. I find this field of visual music way too small. But that also has the advantage that it's relatively easier to make a dent in it. But I would also like to like that group of people to expand a little bit more. So it's great that you guys are doing what you're doing.
All right, I think that about wraps it up. So thank you again for joining us and sharing all of this knowledge. Really appreciate it. And yeah, talk to you soon. Have a good night.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. It was fun. Bye-bye.
40.4.